What's your rating?
Mine is a 4.79.
Okay, well, I'm a 4.89, so...
Wow, really?
Hi, I'm Andy.
And I'm Roger.
And welcome to The Middle,
where we try to have thoughtful conversations
about awkward topics
on our search to find the middle.
That's fatphobic.
I don't feel war. I just own halfway to Siwa.
A few moments ago, Buckingham Palace announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
I act as if God exists.
Put your masks on.
How dare you? You have stolen my dreams, my childhood, with your empty words.
Roger.
Andy, how you doing?
Yeah, not too bad. You had some challenges this evening, I understand.
Yeah, it was track work, I think when you come back late on the weekdays on public transport, you don't realize how much maintenance is going on, right? Most people don't realize. And in Sydney, there's always something where buses replacing something and whatever chaos there needs to be. And just causing mayhem.
It took me about an hour and a half to get from one side of the city to the other today, so I think it was just mayhem. There's been a storm tonight.
Yeah,
didn't help.
I feel like Australia, well, I'll just talk for Sydney, I suppose. I feel it's like that where as soon as there's not perfect weather, everything breaks down, everyone loses their mind, like a little bit of rain, a storm, whatever it is. It's nuts. I was like, shouldn't we be able to deal with a bit of rain? Yeah, I don't know. Why do you think being stuck in traffic is so annoying? Because on the face of it, like, you're in your own space, you're in the car that you bought, you're listening, you're controlling the climate, which is half the battle at the office, and you're listening to whatever you want to listen to, but still it's infuriating.
It's frustrating. So when I was driving, there's this sort of road where you have to be in a certain lane to turn right, and everyone is in that lane because they're turning right, and it goes for even potentially like a kilometre and a half before the right turn is that everyone's sort of in that lane, and there's a big traffic jam, but you've got to be in that lane because if you're not, you won't get where you need to go. And what was happening is all these douchebags come up in the other lanes and just zoom past.
Try to do that late merge.
I've got to say, they're almost always Uber drivers with the little black Uber, and I could just see the frustration of like everyone who's done the right thing and they've got their place in the queue, just absolutely, utterly frustrated and just not letting them in, like quite aggressively, just blocking them.
That is tough. And I think especially where you live, right? Like going up the coast, people are like locals and they do that all the time. So I can imagine they would have no patience for Uber drivers that are trying to just take advantage.
And they're doing it in a very calculated way. It's just they know what they're doing, but it's just very frustrating. Yeah,
maybe we're thinking about it the wrong way, Andy, because an Uber driver that has passengers actually helping that passenger, it would actually, the incentives would be for them to just pull in because it's time-based as well as kilometers-based. So actually, maybe they are doing the right thing by the paying customer who is burning money.
But is that actually the case? Because aren't Uber fares like predetermined? So it's like you...
No, they're estimated.
But your actual final fare is never different to when you hit the button, right? Like Uber estimates it, and then like I've only ever got a discount. I've had a situation where they give you some money back, but I've never had a situation where they say, "Oh, I'm sorry, we estimated it was like $17, but it was actually $35."
I think I'm getting confused now because I thought that when you got like an Uber Black or something, it was an estimate, but you would just get the final fare at the end, and it would be just charged that you would have no choice but to pay it.
I might be wrong, so I'm not going to like dig a hole on this, but I'm pretty sure that whenever I've got an Uber, you order it, you get like a pre-authorization on your credit card or whatever, PayPal or whatever, and it will charge, like that's the charge at that time before you even arrive at your destination.
So all this talk about Uber is actually bringing back a memory, right? And I used to work with someone that whenever they had a drink, like it would only take literally a sniff of a drink, and they'd have the same line that they would kind of like wheel out as an icebreaker. And it's like, everyone get your phones out, open up Uber, and go around and tell me your rating. And it would always be a thing around like, who's got the best score and is there a reason why someone doesn't have a good score and things like that. So let's do it right now.
Oh, okay.
Open it up. Tell me what your score is, because reflection on a society that bases you.
So this is reminding me of that. Have you seen that Black Mirror episode?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking of next, where it's just like everyone has to rate everyone for an NPS for every interaction, and that really determines everything.
All right. So I'm just trying to work out, how do I...
Uber would have the most amount of data, I would say.
All right.
when it comes to this kind of
what's your rating?
Mine is a 4.79.
Okay. Well, I'm a 4.89, so...
Wow, really? Because I was about to say mine is abnormally high because I actually don't use Uber that much. So actually I was like expecting mine to be like higher than yours. It's quite hard to get in, the level of ratings that you and I have.
Just as an aside, what is it as a passenger that earns you a high rating? Like, is it just not throwing up? Like, is that...
No. So it has an explanation. So basically it's around... If you obviously get a complaint that significantly lowers you, you're going to really, really struggle to get up to the high fours, right? Even with just one complaint. But there's things like, what do they say? They say it's short waiting times, courtesy, safety, whether you've ever cancelled a trip before, things like that, right? So I think that those things tend to count as well, along with actual feedback from the drivers.
Okay. It's...
I think just cancelling for most people is probably the issue. I was about to say, I actually think that Uber is almost the same as a taxi. I actually don't think there is any difference unless you do the proper ride share where you're like, have you ever done that actually?
Carpool?
Yeah. Have you done it?
Yeah, I have done it. I did, like, if I was coming from...
See, I would never do that.
I mean, is it really any different to being on a train?
I can think of a few ways. You don't get rated on a train. Wait, can you imagine if there was a rating system for city rail transport in Sydney that every person had to rate the other person, right?
Have you noticed this? Well, you probably wouldn't because you don't use much public transport anymore, I guess. But now on Sydney trains, they're becoming a lot more paternalistic with their public announcements. So the one that really annoyed me, or it's actively annoying me, is they've got this, how they always just have the sign saying don't put your feet up on the seat, right? Which that's reasonable. Like, I think that's, as a fellow user of the service, I'm glad that that's a rule. But there's this new one now, I'm not sure if you've heard of this, but where it says don't put your bags on the seat. And I think, why? What's the problem in having your bag on the seat? Like, I get it if there's like a busy train and your bag shouldn't, displace someone that wants the seat. But when you've got like a half empty train, come on, I'm putting my bag on the seat. I'm not putting it on the floor.
I've got this camera gear in it, man. No, surely, like, this is exactly what's happened, man. Like, you walk into those carriages where there's those bratty, either school kids or thugs that literally have their feet on the seats, they have their bags on the seats, they have everything they can to take up space, and they are praying that someone starts an altercation with them. It's for those people. And because there are those people circulating on the train, they have to make this, lowest common denominator public announcement that everyone can't put their bags on the seat, because that's easier than trying to say, don't be a dick.
Yeah, but it doesn't make a difference, right? People are a dick anyway, right?
Well, exactly. But how much effort does it take to make a public service announcement?
Well, I'll tell you what the difference is, that the only kind of people who are going to obey the signs and the messages are upstanding citizens, trying to do the right thing.
Yeah, well, I mean, if there's like a sign, right? Like, I mean, it's like people smoking in front of the no smoking sign. It's always a little bit easier to kind of draw it out, right?
Yeah.
Than not. I'm in fan. Have you seen the movie and the series now, Snowpiercer?
No.
Basically, it's this awesome concept, really, that society we're in a post-apocalyptic world. The environment's like frozen over, and basically the last remnants of humans on Earth are jammed into this hypersonic train that essentially moves through the world, and it has all the resources and energy to kind of keep humans alive. But it is sorted in carriage from front to back in terms of the class system. So you have like all these people in the tailies that are pretty much like poverty stricken. They have nothing. And then as it goes up to the top, it's like more first class. And I'm thinking that maybe they should implement a similar system based on the Uber rating of the City Rail passenger going forward, where like if you have a really bad rating, right, like if you're one of those people who has your suitcase on the seat in a packed train in peak hour, you get knocked down to the tailies. And so when you have to take a train next, you have to deal with 1,000 people like you and then have to work your way back up, right? Like I wonder if that's a good social experiment to see that they missed the chance with the metro. They could have done that.
Yeah, they kind of have done that with the intercity trains because, you know, like how they've got the quiet carriages.
I'm not sure that self-selecting into a quiet carriage is quite what I'm talking about.
Well,
in terms of an enforced carriage system.
Just on the intercity trains, right? You get in the carriages and, you know, usually like it's just relatively early in the morning. It's, you know, you just want to have like a bit of quiet time or whatever. And surprisingly at that hour, it's not the issue isn't the young kids and those kind of, I don't know, Eshe style kind of gangs or whatever. The biggest problem, it's all those old people who get on the train for the day trips because they like get up super early. So it's like
they got that $2 ticket to anywhere.
Yeah, they're $2 all day, and they're getting on at the same time as you're like. No one in their right mind will get up that hour except
when you've got a prostate the size of a Florida orange.
But they come in groups as well. It's like they've got their I don't know how but they're all retired and I don't know in their 70s, 80s or whatever, and they're trekking into the city for their day trip. But they just talk to each other. Yeah. And like that's fine, like they're social, but like fuck, I just wish they'd shut up because I just want to just sit in peace and quiet.
What do you think about dark carriages? Like, you know how sometimes it's so amazing when you go on an airplane and the cabin lights are dim, they got that kind of like neon hue and everyone's just like put to sleep. What do you think about that context?
I think in the morning, I think just natural light is best. So not the blaring kind of incandescent lights or fluorescent lights or whatever. But
what if you want a power nap, man?
No, it's not good to do that in the morning anyway. Once you're up, you've just got to jog. That's why the light's important because otherwise you can't. Your body doesn't wake up.
Okay, Huberman. Go and stare at the sun, convincing people to jump in an ice bath and stare at the sun for 15 minutes.
So before we get cracking into our actual episode, just Wayne, you have to go first.
Yeah, I will. I'll take my... All right, so this is what's happening at the moment. The scales are showing that I am heavier than when I started, so that is definitely not ideal. But there is a small glimmer of hope that visually there's a little bit more sharpness going on. So I am under the suspicion that maybe there might be some composition changes because I have been doing a bit more exercise and eating a bit more protein.
But have you been going to your 24-hour gym?
I have gone 3 times.
I think I mentioned last week, didn't have the chance to do a weigh-in. So my 2-week loss was, hang on, let me double check, was 1.4 kilos over the last 2 weeks. So that's good. That's what I want it to be, where I want it to be. And also in a week where it was like the birthday week for my family. So my wife and my son, their birthdays are like within a couple of days of each other. And it's just this crazy week where we're going out to restaurants every night. And and then we met like multiple times because, you do the dinner on the actual birthday and then you do the celebratory dinner with met up with my parents and then my wife's birthday and then, anyway, and then just went out more generally. And then I had to travel for work. And anyway, so in that time had, like kind of all of the bad food that you're not supposed to eat. But nonetheless, it was one meal a day and that seemed to keep it. But
so you didn't break from that? You never had snacks or anything? It's always one meal?
I don't have snacks. So I would never have a snack.
But just coffees?
Sorry, coffees.
Do you have coffees?
I have my coffee in the morning, so that's fine. So when I say 1 meal a day, that I don't count the coffee as part of that regime. So it's not like one of these, I need to like starve myself to get like ketosis happening or anything like that. It's just like the coffee. I know they say, don't have coffee, that'll break it or whatever. But as far as I'm aware, the research says it doesn't really matter. So yeah, I have my coffee because that helps me go through the day, have lots of water throughout the day. When it comes to time for dinner, I'll eat my dinner. I won't really worry too much about portion control. I might have some dessert as well. Like if there's, I'm not overthinking it. But that said, like I'm not eating really shit dinners either, generally. The good thing, just to wrap this segment off, the good thing was that I was able to cross a 10 kilo threshold. So the number went from, I won't say which decade I'm in, I don't know what the equivalent of a decade is for kilograms, but I did get into the next,
Seeing that number change. That's good. Yeah.
So today we're going to cover a few aspects to do with the media, the established formal media. Is that right? We haven't really discussed what we're going to talk about, so this is going to be a little bit of a wing it session.
So unlike us. Do you mean the media or like the media?
Not social media, I guess. Or maybe social.
I was actually talking about the Jewish-run media.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, look, I know that personally I've made a few comments in the last few videos, and especially talking about recent events, that I feel that the media never really get their just desserts, right? Like in terms of how they contribute to some of the negative behavior and negative outcomes that we see. So I am kind of keen to talk about this. And then from another angle, we have spoken a lot how there are real differences on how we consume news and things like that these days, right? And that is also contributing to public discourse and a range of things going on, right? Like it's probably timely too with everything that's happening around the world and America, on the cusp of going through another election cycle where, it wasn't too long ago that Trump and fake news and all this kind of stuff really was pushed into the vernacular, right? So I'm keen on your understanding. I'm keen on discussing some of that with you, right? Like, so we have kind of broached this before, but maybe is a decent place to start. Is that before we have a look at it across the board, like, how do you get your news nowadays?
I almost exclusively get all of my news from news websites, so I don't. I don't really watch TV news anymore. I used to, but I just found it not really hitting the spot. But like, I guess I would also distinguish between, kind of news in the day-to-day things that happen that you can forget about 24 hours later, and sort of the longer term, things that happen in the world, like whether it's like working out what's happening in Ukraine, for example, like, or US election cycle or whatever, like where I would pick up most of my knowledge of those kind of longer term things, not through any traditional media channels. Like it would be, like predominantly podcasts, but maybe also like contemporary books or whatever.
So when you say through news websites, do you do it through the phone?
No, not. Oh, yeah. Well, I do, but not exclusively. So I guess at work is a place where I would, and partly that's because I've got in some instances, I need to be across not so much the, world events or whatever at work, but like, there might be some things that I, just generally need to be aware of in the day to day. And like, I think there is a degree of acceptance now in the workplace that, yes, it is okay to, spend 15 minutes or so just to get up to speed, like that. I think that's part of a modern workplace now.
Isn't that what the second monitor is for?
As an aside, like, what do you think of the ethics of, like, what's accepted in modern workplace?
I don't think my ethics are going to surprise you on this matter. But okay. All right. So first of all, let me say that I am totally against work tracking in the digital sense, because I think that is actually an invasion that is not warranted, right? And so when I'm talking about digital monitoring, I'm talking about keystroke application monitoring, things of that nature, right? Which companies do use a lot nowadays, and they don't really have an obligation to have to tell all their employees exactly how that works. Now, in the open plan jungle, I'll say, of my company, there's very, very different attitudes towards it. So ranging from the person who it's like unacceptable, they will literally alt-tab, they will alt-tab away from the news website because they don't want anyone to be walking past to see them not focused on, a really productive application that they're using, to people who have dual monitors and literally on one monitor permanently will be a news website. Just there. It's like, it's always there. So they have one monitor that is, their main source of work, whether it be, an office application or whatever it is. whatever tool that they're using. And then the second monitor is purely like the news website will live there all day. And it's just like, I'm not hiding this. This is like me having, the news on, like all the stock price just ticking away, right? And this is just out for everyone to see. There's nothing sinister going on here. It's a news website.
I think you got to earn the right to be blatant, right? I think if you're productive and you're known to be productive, you can.
It's never those people though, Andy.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. Like, I think maybe there's. I think the alt tabbers are the ones who, like, it's almost like they've got something to hide, right? I think it's the equivalent of, like, if you know you're of value to whatever organization you work in, and you know that no one can fault you for your work, and you're in a very comfortable place in your job and your position, then there's like, you're quite comfortable to just get on and work the way that you think is acceptable, and that can include having a website out that isn't work related. But the alt tabbers, like, that to me is almost I don't know, there's like something to hide, and if it is something that needs to be alt tabbed, then it begs the question of,
at least, like, they're making the
you
effort,
probably shouldn't be doing it at work. You know what I mean?
At least they're making the effort though, compared to the people who just like have it up the whole time.
Yeah,
right?
but the alt tabbing is concealing it, right? It's hiding that you're doing something.
Well, they're literally closing it though, right? They're looking at it less.
Well, it's just like when someone walks past, right? No, but like, I think if you feel that you've got to hide it, that's your internal. You're conceding into, like, in your own mind that you shouldn't be doing it. Whereas I think the person who's got it up, and maybe it's contextual factors in there to do with their role, or just maybe even their general productivity, right? I'm going to rescue this conversation. So you started by asking me how I consume news. So I'm going to throw that back at you. How are you getting your news in between your alt tabbing of having news articles at work?
Well, that's why I work from home. No, look, I have actually really struggled in terms of the mix of how I consume news. So I feel like when I was a bit younger, and maybe this was because I was more office-based and things, I had a better handle on it. I've found that it's really fragmented in the last couple of years, and especially since COVID and things like that. And it's spread along a lot of things. So also that I'm in with my parents at the moment while we're looking for a place. And what I've found since I've been living at home, essentially, with older Asian parents, is that the generational creep from news sources is like really, really interesting to me. So I'm exposed now to a really wide range of news that I wouldn't normally do. So I'm talking the news being on the TV in the kitchen, like the legacy, what they say, legacy news outlets, right? Every now and then, Dad brings back a newspaper. Sorry,
legacy news. Can you talk me through what you mean?
Oh, sorry, that? just like free to air news. So like Channel 7, Channel 9 news
like
products.
The 6 p.m. bulletin on free to air.
Yeah, that kind of stuff, right? Okay. And like some commercial stuff like that. And then every now and then Dad started to buy the paper again for some really strange unknown reason that he, newspapers have been showing up, right? And newspapers like are very nostalgic, obviously, because we grew up, there was newspapers everywhere. And every now and then, if there's one on the table, you just find yourself, before you even know what you're doing, you're thumbing through it, right? And I've found myself doing that a couple of times. And then, of course, I get infiltrated with all the usual social media stuff, right? That stuff is like pummeled into my feed, and kind of I get, I wear an Apple Watch, and I get like alerts from certain news outlets and things like that with like headlines and things like that. You can always tell when there's a good news cycle because there's less and less interest rate announcements, and when there's bad, it's only interest rates. So yeah, like it's really fragmented to me, and I feel like there are times where I do feel like I don't have a good handle on where my trusted news sources are, and I don't use Twitter. So that's something that actually I've found it just too overwhelming in the past to find good Twitter. And I haven't yet gone down the rabbit hole of being religious around like Substack or other paid, written journalistic things, which I've wanted to do for some time. but I haven't really done it. I've only looked at certain articles when they've been brought to my attention by other sources, whether they're podcasts or whatever. But I know that people that are really on top of their shit, they have their subscriptions and they go through it religiously. They have that queue, and I'd like to get there. You know, do you use any Substack?
Substack, I don't know that there's that much value in it, if I'm honest. Like, I think not for news. Like, I think people who like essays on topics or whatever, but yeah, I don't know what extra value.
It's more about like, so what I've heard the position is that it's very, obviously you've got, if you were to map out the major news outlets and things like that, they obviously have their political leanings, and many times they're part of different umbrella groups and different editorial kind of forces. When you go through a true independent, using a platform like Substack or something like that, you can get into this view of actually you trust the journalists for certain things, and it helps you kind of provide that bridge over what you might have heard on more of these broadcast services, right?
So see, I don't. I think it's the other way, to be honest. I think the risk of platforms like Substack, and just for, like, in case anyone's wondering what the hell we're talking about, like, Substack's like a platform where you join up and you sign up to a particular, well, they'd be called a creator if they're on YouTube or something else, but they're essentially a citizen journalist, if you like, and you can subscribe and you can actually contribute some money, or that they can do it as like subscribe for a fee or whatever, and you get access to their essays or whatever they write on it. But I think what happens on platforms like that is the incentives are all just to cater to, like, you get audience capture, right? And even like the ones that pitch themselves as credible, like as more credible, like we're not talking like Alex Jones or blatantly extreme voices. It might even be a more subtle thing. You're going to subscribe to the ones whose worldview you kind of tend to align yourself with, right? It's not like this neutral source. Like, people see the world the way they see it, right?
Well, yeah, and I do understand the whole audience capture thing, but I would say that, like, in terms of a system that provides incentives to, to like have your own integrity around the editorial that you provide, something like Substack and a payment to the journalist and the creator does incentivize more honest.
I don't think it does, though. Like, I think that goes to the incentives at play, right? The incentives of the subscription are purely like, you need more subscribers because that's what's going to make you more money. And we've seen, like, in tons of different kind of communities where it's like seemingly like sane or very intellectually honest people become overnight incredibly intellectually dishonest. And I don't know the extent to which that happens on Substack because I don't use it, but in other domains, like we see that in so many different areas, like whether they're YouTube kind of commentariats or whatever, or they know that like a particular approach is going to tickle the fancies of their audience. You just have to kind of believe that they don't believe what they're actually saying, but they're just saying it because they're going to grow their channel, right? And that, like, still want to hold on to that hope that they're sensible. And I kind of feel like, let's say just to contrast it with maybe our traditional model, right? A traditional model, you'd have, I'm just going to pick like the Sydney Morning Herald, right? Because this is an institution that's, I don't know how old, but it's certainly more than 100 years. It'd be probably close to 200 years, if not. And it's this very long-running institution that has, a very high reputation, very enduring. It's been around for so long. It has an editor. The editor is entrusted to steer the ship. They cultivate different views in the newspaper, so they've got multiple editorial contributions, but they've also got, their journalists are, have to do reliable and credible articles on topics. And that kind of an ecosystem has withstood the test of time. And like in all this new media space, particularly as we're talking now about like AI, and now, anyone can write, a decent article with ChatGPT, that actually, when we move into a world where you can't quite tell what's real and what isn't, that maybe these institutions will have the day again, because that's the only way you can really, truly verify the quality of information, right?
Yeah, I mean, you painted a fairly favourable kind of stance on it. I mean, would you say the same thing about, say, like the Daily Telegraph?
Well, I think the difference there is one is known and is credible, and its value proposition is to have more sensible, straightforward, unbiased kind of, it's not pushing an agenda sort of thing. And the other is the Sydney Morning Herald. No, just joking. No, the Daily Telegraph
is the same model, though.
No, but it's not. It's not. The Daily Telegraph, like, everyone knows what the Daily Telegraph is. No one pretends that the Daily Telegraph is serious news, right? It's known.
They may obviously understand that it has its leanings, but I don't think the readers believe that it is.
It's the equivalent of talkback radio. It's talkback radio in print, and I think when you have so I've given like the Sydney Morning Herald. So some people would certainly say the Sydney Morning Herald is biased in it. Like, no news ecosystem, like say a newspaper like that, is going to not have people say it's biased one way or the other. But let's say we talk about, let's say the Financial Times, right? Very famous publication. It is, its whole reputation is providing respected, factual, and to have sensible views on things where they do editorialize. So that is appealing to a segment of the market that the Daily Telegraph is not pitching itself to.
I guess my view is more that they're still responding to certain interests, I suppose, right? In a way that, like, yes, you have audience capture, but it unlocks a certain level of independent thinking. If you have if you strip back to like a much more kind of mercenary approach to this. Now, I think
the difference with like Substack is, like, let's say you've got someone who wants to start a YouTube channel as like a commentator, like a public commentator on things, right? Their incentives in terms of if they want to do this full time is they have to grow. They have to get more subscribers. They have to get more video views. And it's hard to do that unless you compromise yourself in some way. Now, I don't think that is as perverse on Substack as it would be YouTube, because YouTube is generally a more kind of mainstream sort of entertainment, Yeah. But whereas Substack, like, people who are going to subscribe to essays, like there's a certain cohort of people who, kind of will hold Substackers.
Well, and don't forget, a lot of Substack creators have a day job at these more legacy firms, and then this is their kind of personal. I'll tell you what I really think on my Substack.
Fair enough. I think definitely just having one single source, like it's always better to have a diversity of perspectives, right? And if you religiously read a Substack profile as opposed to reading, a credible newspaper that has multiple voices represented, you'll probably get a much more holistic view from reading whatever you read at the credible newspaper. But that said, you may not get, like, for me, what I understand the value of Substack is that you get like really high quality essays on things that are far beyond what you get in a newspaper. So, like, it's almost like it's somewhere between a news article and a book, right? It's
or a journal, like a journal.
Yeah.
No, I'm with you. So, look, I want to move on to a bit of a question around like generational changes, right? And I think that, like, when you look at the evolution of how we're consuming the news, right? And this kind of idea of, like, they're talking about this idea for a long time now of convergence, like the convergence of lots of different news style sources into one, whether it's like radio, video, like all these kind of broadcast kind of things, right? And the chasing their tail around how some of these mediums are regulated. I kind of think that, like, when you talk about, do you believe that the consumption of news and world events is something that grows as you age, or do you think you're either kind of like in it from early age or not?
I think there's a function of time, right? Like, older people, if they're retired, have more time to listen to the radio or watch TV or whatever. So I definitely think that's at play. But
like, as a general proposition, though, do you think that, like, being informed or being kind of across the news, is that one that lies in a cultural aspect of people or just like the demographics?
Maybe draw a distinction, right? Because like news isn't always watched because people want to be informed, right? So like news is mostly watched because it's like entertainment, right? So, and that's partly why I'm not that interested in watching free to air news, kind of the TV news bulletin anymore, because it's just, yes, it's entertainment sort of, but like, is it more entertaining than YouTube? I don't know. Probably not. And equally, is it informative? Like, do I feel like I'm across things better as a result of watching it? Well, probably not. Like, I can go without knowing that a car crashed into a tree, or there was a traffic jam earlier today. Like, I don't need
mushroom
to know
poisoning.
like, those things are sort of, and at least that's the good thing about news articles, like on online, is you just skim it and go, okay, that's interesting. So you can catch up as quickly as you are genuinely interested in what's put before you. Whereas you just got to sit through an hour of news now. Like it doesn't make sense to me. But to your question, like staying informed, I definitely I think this kind of probably has like correlation with like the extent to which people want to be like are interested in politics, right? Or being across political issues, right? So if you're someone who is interested in just not so much yourself being an activist like in political sphere, but like you just want to know what's going on, or you have, like it was amazing to when we recently had the Voice referendum, when the news people were interviewing people who were going to vote, the amount of people that they bumped into and they said, I haven't figured out how I'm going to vote yet. It's like, how can you not have a view yet, like on this thing? And I think
we've released 2 podcast episodes about it already.
You have no excuse. But like, that's incredible. Like, and I think that shows the divide. So if you don't have like a strong view of, which political party you support, for example, then in whatever election, even if you're a swinging voter, I think that probably that's probably where the divide is. It's like, no, I'm someone who wants to know what's going on, who pays attention to this stuff, not just domestic politics, but like chances are if you're into domestic politics, you're going to be interested in a whole manner of other things as well.
Yeah, like I do feel that, I remember growing up, especially with my dad. My dad was just so on the ball when it came to like international news. I remember one time just being like really in awe and thinking, gee, when I grow up and be an adult, how am I going to do this? And some, obviously like there's no point just knowing the leadership structure in Kuwait just for the purpose of knowing it without any other follow-up inquiry. But like, I'm not interested in that kind of rote knowledge, but it is something that makes me think sometimes, like, how do you build a base that you can actually live with, right, as a strong foundation? And I think that's kind of missing, and we probably do well to kind of have that in a kind of more curriculum basis before you leave school. I think this idea of like, how do you form like a good base of knowledge, or how do you get there in terms of participating in some of these things, is a question I have. Like, and in Western democracies, does it really matter? Like, is it okay to just switch off, right, and say, look, I'm busy, I don't care, I don't have an opinion on everything, I don't want an opinion on everything. And I'm trying to work out like what that balance is, right? Because you see it, the dark side of it sometimes, where people, we've talked about this before, people feel like they want to put in their 2 cents, but they don't have that foundation. And so instead of doing the homework, they just quick draw from the hip, and then things really start falling over. I think when you get enough people doing that, right?
Well, we know that happens. Like, it's people defaulting to whatever the simplest way of assessing an issue, right?
But why are we so like then protective of mandatory voting in Australia, if that really is the case?
Well, because mandatory voting prevents, like in most other political systems, the way you win an election isn't just to have a good message, it's also to bring out your base. So what that can tend to do is foster more extreme positions on things. So like, let's say, to use the Republican Party in the United States as an example, the reason Donald Trump is likely going to be the candidate is because he can bring out the base in a way that no other candidate can, because I don't know, for some reason he's just the messiah to the sort of the everyday Republican in America, and they'll come out and vote. So you get these more extreme figures who appeal to their base being put forward, and it kind of polarizes, where I think in Australia that sort of everyone has to vote means you actually have more moderate political figures generally, because if you go out with a really extreme view that it might bring out the 500 people who are a member of the, actual paid members of the Labor Party or the Liberal Party, but you've got to actually have someone who'll appeal to everyone else, and that's good for democracy as opposed to the narrow group of people who are engaged in politics.
Yeah. Fair call. All right, let me give you a bit more of a perverse example. Well, maybe it's not perverse, but I know someone that I work with, and it's this kind of dueling thing, right? So they have admitted to me that they get all of their 100%, the entirety of their media coverage from social media. Okay. Now, you would think that is okay for entertainment and all these kind of things, and they're probably not someone who's super serious about this stuff, but they are. So when you've got the twin levers of someone who does want to hold and does hold a lot of opinions about these things and wants to participate in a greater conversation, but they're only getting it from social media, do you think that's kind of a problem or not really?
Well, it's not a problem. I mean, people can do what they like, really. Consume, people don't have to consume news. I don't. That was something you said before. Like, do people have a responsibility? Like, do we need to aspire to kind of be learned sort of people, and do we have a responsibility? And I think no. I think if you don't give a shit, then power to you. And I think equally, if people aren't really interested in a particular way of consuming news, but just happen to see and come up on their social media feed, that's okay too. But at the same time, if those people then want to also be very loud and outspoken on whatever the issue is, then they probably should check themselves first and kind of maybe just accept that maybe they don't know as much as they think they do. And it's like the classic thing where they take the little sound bite or the part of the story that sounds really outrageous, but when you see it in the broader context, it's actually much less, and that's the bit that social media doesn't allow to, and even regular news for that matter, doesn't allow to be drawn out. And we saw that during the Voice, debate where, this person said this thing, and then it's like this 10-second grab from like a 20-minute speech that, out of context sounds really bad. And that happens with any news source. So, I don't know. What about you? Like, are you do you look down on people who...
I do. And look, I would give that a free pass if you are someone who just likes getting their kicks off by just watching the drama of it all, right? The drama and the conflict, because no one's above that, all right? Like, I don't care what you say. When there's a car crash and you drive past, what do? You fucking look at it, right? Like, and it's just human nature. And I'm willing to, leave a lot of space on the table for that kind of behavior, because it's somewhat involuntary, right? When you see a fight or when you see a conflict, you can't help but look. But I do think that when you're someone who prides themselves or has a little bit of their identity as someone who is across social issues or current affairs or international relations, but you're literally just like sitting back in the lazy boy and letting the algorithm just like pump you whatever filth that you've looked at before or paused too long on while you're scrolling between bikini pictures, I think that like that's not a good recipe. And so I do kind of like it's too kind of jarring to hear that, right? That you are a social justice warrior or you're someone who has strong views, but literally you rely on social media, TikTok, Instagram to get your stuff.
But actually, you were saying before, like generationally, like differences, and maybe this is a younger generation thing, and actually it's probably also an older generational thing with social media, because both have their
Facebook
own
groups,
flaws. But like, you have to be able to understand and place whatever you're reading in the context of who's written it, and think, well, first of all, are they a credible source? We were talking before around the Daily Telegraph, right, and the Sydney Morning Herald. So if I'm reading a Daily Telegraph article, I'm instinctively reading it as a Daily Telegraph article, and any fact that's in it, I'm contextualizing in that context, right? Same with the Sydney Morning Herald article, same with an AFR article, like same with the podcast episode, same with, listening to a snippet of Talkback Radio or free-to-air TV, right? And I'm placing it. But I don't think people have learned to do that, like who've grown up on social media.
Well,
and old people don't know how to do it because they just assume everything's credible.
I think that's the latter is that my issue with that I think that actually, even if you might start off that way, where you go, oh, this is, News Corp, Rupert Murdoch or whatever, if you are a regular buyer, you're on subscription, you get the Daily Telegraph delivered every day, you start to believe it, right? Like you don't read it and go, oh, this is just like, this is The Onion, right? Like this is just fake headlines and entertainment. You do think that this is actually a valid and trustworthy form of news. And I feel like they don't have that same view, right? And that, when I say that, I'm not talking about just like old people. I think just like anyone who has elected to do that. And like you said, they think because it's a big publication that it holds weight, right?
Just with the notion of car crashes, have you ever watched any of these like audit videos on YouTube?
I have watched a little bit, and like I said, we do share some social media accounts because of our projects together, and I get served up quite a few of these now, these confrontation videos, because you've cracked a massive binge on them.
I've been sorry.
Yeah, so like I see shorter versions of it as well, and every now and then I'll get some similar confrontation videos that get to the point of just that kind of like just the tip of a physical confrontation, but it still keeps you in that realm of like heated debate that you're just like, oh my God, like then, and your heart's starting to go and the adrenaline's pouring in. So yes, I have seen a few. So why do you think they're so addictive?
Well, I just think there's firstly, they're real, right? So, and they're so unpredictable and you don't know where it's going, like, and what's going to happen. But just for anyone who doesn't know what these audit videos, like these are people who have a camera, maybe a drone or something like that. And their whole thing is like they're called audit videos because they go around and do, well, at least they say they're doing audits of some physical premises, right? I think the trend maybe started off with like police stations and things like that, but now they're doing like industrial estates and all other kind of places, and they just go and film, and they sort of refer to themselves as like citizen journalists and stuff like this, doing audits to, public interest and check for safety and the laws are upheld and all this stuff. But but that's actually not the point of the video. Like the point of the video is just to rile people up, and they usually kind of try and, if they don't get a reaction, they try and get one. So they might film and then no one's responding. So then they're like, oh, okay, well, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to go and, speak to the security guard, tell them that they're going to fly a drone over their building, and then hopefully that'll get a reaction. And then
so is the drone, isn't it?
Then it films. They film the reaction, and it's of course, like the formula is usually that the people who are reacting don't know the laws, like don't know the rules, but the person who's filming, they've really studied like all of the relevant rules and regulations, so they can just like
got all the loopholes.
Yeah, they just make the person on that's trying to stop them from doing it look really silly, and it is quite addictive because it. I mean, on one level, I just want to say, yeah, that's like actually like this is the kind of behavior that as a society we should like really despise, right? But at the same time, it's like, he's the protagonist, like, or the auditors are the protagonists, and it's like you've got to root for them.
I've seen a lot of them too with and again, you don't really know sometimes you can't tell whether how true some of them are. Obviously, like the raw is usually you can tell, right? Like if there's a production value, because it is hard to manufacture genuine confrontation. Like you can tell when it's fake.
Yeah, but I think the thing is like the whole premise of these videos work because the people engaging with them don't understand what's going on. They don't realize that they're actually the star of the show. And the moment that they actually twig to that is the moment that, oh shit, I better go away. Like this is just fueling. Like, so they don't work. They can't quite work out the dynamics at play and what's actually going to get them the action that they want. So they usually do the opposite of so they think by screaming and shouting, they think that that's going to get them to stop, but that's actually only going to get them to do more because that's they're giving them gold. I'm not sure if we've covered everything you wanted to cover today, but I do have one question for you, one final very important question that I think it would be remiss of us not to ask and address, but is the ABC biased?
I do have a lot of time for the ABC, and you can ask this about any kind of state-sponsored news outlet or production, right? And I do think that they hold an important role. I would say that my experience on the cuff, without doing the proper analysis, is that they are left-leaning, and I feel like it's kind of like, how do I put this into a bit of an analogy? Say if the ABC's a wall, right? The bricks are relatively even, right? If a brick constitutes a diversity in views and political affiliations, but the mortar that holds it all together is 100% left. I feel like it's kind of like that at play whenever I consume material from the ABC, where it's they try to be fair, and a lot of the times they are, and I think if they did a fact check at some point where how many different representatives were on there and it was roughly equal, but the way in which they construct it, the kind of attitudes and values that they put through, probably I would say is a centre-left kind of appeal for me.
Yeah. I think it's as simple as this. If you could somehow get data on how ABC employees voted at the last election and you mapped that against the Australian population, it would be completely unrepresentative, right? So the way they would vote in an election, so they might have rules and they might have procedures they've got to follow to be balanced and unbiased, and they can't do this and they have to do this if they're going to do that, and they might keep track of how many people they have from each side and la-da-da-da-da. But at the end of the day, they can't truly represent the broad view of the Australian public if they are not staffed by people who possess the broad views of the Australian public. And in practical terms, I think what's even worse is that no one who, well, I won't say no one because I think there are still lots of people who watch the ABC still, but generally speaking, people who want to watch the ABC, for things like news and current affairs and stuff like that, they don't tend to be Middle Australia, right? So Middle Australia is not watching it, and yet they still have to maintain this balanced, so their audience is not, their actual audience are all inner city lefties, right? And they don't want that balance. They want the left wing kind of antidote to Sky News, right? But ABC can't give it to them because they're bound by legislation and this. Yeah. So it's actually just shit for everyone as a result.
I know, it's someone turned the saturation down, but all the colors are dim. But at the same time, right? I think that's why watching something like a Q&A program is so excruciating, because it's meant to be. It has so much potential in some ways of a town square, a little window into a microcosm of a town square, but because of exactly what you talked about, the people that are dying to watch, for Monday to come around to watch Q&A are the inner city lefties, because they want to speak truth to power and grill some politicians on some cause or whatever. And I just don't think anyone, the model is just kind of set up wrong. But I would say though that you mentioned this before. Would you say that this idea of them being lefties would apply to, or progressive, let's just say progressive, would apply to all journalists pretty much?
No, it doesn't apply to all journalists.
The journalist class, I suppose.
Maybe the class, as in, okay, well, maybe to answer it slightly differently, I think young people who aspire to study journalism as journalist graduates from, they're all very idealistic about the profession. I think they're very heavily progressive, except that I think at the same time there are people who fall into journalism that maybe not through that channel, but as in they may not identify as journalists first, but there are people who are just commentators in general who might come into the profession later who represent a more balanced. In fact, they might be very heavily biased in a conservative sense, but there are definitely people employed like, newspapers like The Australian. I mean, we've talked about the Daily Telegraph, but I mean, if The Australian is the sort of the so-called serious sort of News Corp presence in the market, there's definitely plenty of right-wing commentators in their newspapers.
With a heart of gold, though, what's your take on Piers Morgan? He's having a bit of a moment.
Look, I don't listen to him or anything like that, so I don't have. I say this like I can only react to what I know that he's done, but like whenever there's a controversy involving him, I'm usually like, I'm on his side. Like I agree with him. Like for whatever the issue is. Like so, yeah. I don't know if that probably gets him into trouble, but I just think he's like, he's like, no, screw you. I'm going to tell you what I really think, and this is probably what most people think too. It's just that you're in your bubble and you don't know it.
Yeah.
What's the latest? What have I just? What scandal have I just signed up to?
I haven't set you up. I haven't laid a trap for you to fall into much. There's like toy snakes down the bottom of the pit, not real snakes. Yeah. Look, I actually agree with you. Obviously, he's straddling that line of.
Well, you said he's having a moment. What's the moment he's having now? Because I'm not aware of that.
I think that if you were to ingest into his media machine or his show, Piers Morgan Uncensored or whatever it was, all the fucking culture filth that culture wars filth that we've been discussing, like trans stuff and microaggressions and all these kind of other little obscure things that people get really upset about. You would kind of look at his performance and be like, yeah, he talks a lot of no nonsense, but ultimately he's being a lot of bad faith takes, right? Like you said, he should know better, but he's doing this for entertainment or X, Y, and Z as a international journalist. But I think that what his moment is probably more the coverage of Israel-Palestine. So he's had a lot of the running joke is that he must be secretly pro-Palestinian because he's had so many pro-Palestinian guests onto his show and he's been completely owned by them. So he's either pro-Palestinian or just like really incompetent at getting the message across. But I don't think either of those things are true, but he's definitely, if you look at kind of like his coverage in a modern sense and the platform that he's giving to a lot of pro-Palestinian voices that actually do have something to say, they're not just lowball kind of guests that he can steamroll. That's something that I think that he's going to gain a new generation of followers. All right, man. Well, I feel like I definitely need to get my news consumption in shape, and I'm going to do a little bit of homework and report back on what my new Substack subscriptions will be.
Okay, and I'll
you can tear it apart.
Keep not reading Substack.
Let's do it.
All right.